Hello and welcome. There's heavy fighting still around Klishchiivka. Both sides attack, Russians do counterattack, Ukrainians try to flank. We'll talk about this, where the biggest fighting is happening right now, as well as about the fighting about Robotine. Other than that, we have a ton of information about Prigozhin and Putin, the interior struggles, and more aid coming for Ukraine, as well as some highly interesting videos from Ukraine. So stay tuned. In the overall situation, I can report that there is another air attack is being reported. Shahid, again, 17 being used. Ukraine claims they shot down 16. Another S-300 surface-to-air missile was also used in a ground attack role. Ukraine doesn't say whether they shot it down. On the northern area, north of the Seversky Donetsk, the Russians have attacked at Nevske, Terny, Torske. So in this direction here and here, as well as in Debrova and in the Serebryansk forest. There is no confirmed successes of them as of now, and the Russians say they repulsed Ukrainian attacks coming from Nevske, so probably in this area here as well. South of the Seversky Donetsk, we have reported a Ukrainian attack close to Bilohorivka. In which direction, I'm not really sure, but the Russians say they repulsed it. The Russians also say they defeated a Ukrainian attack at Ryhorivka, which was here. So the Ukrainians must have attacked in this direction. There's fighting around Berhivka. The Ukrainians are attacking right now, but before that, they were being pushed back. We see this. This is a pro-Ukrainian military blogger who is reporting. We had it in the past that the Ukrainians had entered the town at the outskirts. Now they are pretty sure they have been pushed somewhat back, but the fighting is continuing in this area. What about the control about Klishchiivka here? The heights is still somewhat unclear. We have reports by the same Ukrainian military blogger. The map is also used by pro-Russian ones, that according to this, the fighting is about the heights. But we don't have any clear, it's not clear who actually controls them, how solidified the control is. You'll find some pro-Ukrainian bloggers claiming that they have it, but it seems to not be completely the case. So at this point, we can say that the fighting is happening for the heights, and the towns itself seems to be still in Ukrainian hands. According to this here, we see that the fighting is in the south. They had some successes in the area of Kurdyumivka and Andrivka, but the heights itself are still under fire. This is confirmed by the Russians as well. Here, the Riba is claiming they pushed back the Ukrainians by 500 meters. I have found no confirmation of this. This might be pure fantasy. I'm not completely sure about this. Here, recaptured about 500 meters and entrenched themselves there. There is a fortification line going down like this here. So this would probably be the 500 meters if they had been successful. But as said, I don't find any confirmation, so we don't know whether that's true. And Riba is the one saying that. Voenkor, also pro-Russian, is not writing about this. They don't claim they pushed them back. Instead, we have them basically confirming what the pro-Ukrainians said, that the fighting is continuing and that the Ukrainians were successful somewhere in the south. And of course, they claim they took prisoners. We see one of them here. So generally, Klishchiivka is still seems to fairly certain still be under Russian control, and the heights that dominate the area are still under heavy fighting, are still contested, but as of now the front line hasn't moved very much there. I excuse my voice, I got a light flu, so yeah, I hope it's not too bad for you. So overall there, the Ukrainians slowly creep forward. They get closer to Klishchiivka, but we don't see a breakthrough yet, and the Russians weren't forced to withdraw from it yet, which most seem to be certain that there's no way of the Russians to hold Klishchiivka if the Ukrainians managed to establish themselves on the high ground here. If we go further south to Avdiivka, we have reports about Ukrainian attacks towards Krasnohorivka here and Siverne. The Russians themselves attacked in the direction of Novokalinove, Pervomaiske here, Marinka and Novomikhailivka. So here and here, no confirmation of changes, but we have something amusing, and that is Kadyrov is saying that they are now leaving Marinka for a front line with a more difficult area. Now, Kadyrov's guys, the Kadyrovtsi, were sent to Marinka to take it like 2 months ago, and we didn't see any serious change in the control of the town. And now they are moved somewhere else. Make of that what you think yourself. And we have a report from this area southeast of Pobjeda. It should be more or less this area here. It was recaptured by the Ukrainians after having lost it a while ago, and now even the Russians say the Ukrainians managed to repulse several attacks of them, so the Ukrainians can show some local tactical successes in this area. On the border between Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia, here south of Velika Novosilka, fighting is obviously also going on. Ukrainians have some successes towards Priutne. That is confirmed by the Russians themselves, and the Russians report ongoing Ukrainian attacks towards Novodonetsk, towards Rivnopil, from Rivnopil south here in this direction, and in the direction of Uroshaine. I cannot confirm any successes there, but we have some confirmation of successes. Vorgonzo pro-Russian, so we take their admission of defeat as more or less a fact. Vorgonzo says that the Ukrainians were able to to somewhat advance in the direction of Staromaiske, so they should have probably gained some ground here, probably a position or two. No breakthrough here either. Further west, south of Orikhiv, we have a report by the Ukrainians. They claim they advanced more than 1,700 meters. I have no idea where, and obviously, then again, from a source criticism point, image picks or it didn't happen, or at least have the Russians admit defeat or it didn't happen. So we don't know where that success supposedly happened, but we do have some successes. First, we had an admission from, I think it was yesterday. Yes, yesterday, Vorgonzo said that they less than a kilometer to the south, to the outskirts. So the Ukrainians managed to creep closer towards Robotine. We have again the same military blogger showing us, and this is Robotine here. So the Ukrainians advanced in this area here, closer. This is confirmed from both sides, and now we have Vorgonzo, and here you see Robotine is basically, according to them, almost reached. Vorgonzo from today is saying here this is that they attacked there and that they had further successes in this direction. Further west of it, in the direction of Vasilivka, there's reported reconnaissance attacks in the Sherebianki-Piatichaki area. So no serious sized attacks, but the Ukrainians show some activity there. No change in the control of territory. Further west over the Dnipro, nothing changes here. The Ukrainians are settled on some of the islands. Most important here under the Antonivka Bridge. The Russians so far in the last 2 days don't seem to have done any ground attacks. It's mostly artillery shelling from both sides, so the situation is more or less stable as of now. Overall, not much movement here. The biggest fighting is, or the most important, is south of Bakhmut, Klishchiivka. The Ukrainians seem to be close to capturing the high ground, and at least according to Riba, that would force the Russians back up to Opitne. Whether they'll be able to settle down on this high ground, we can't really say, but Riba was guessing that they might be forced to withdraw up to Opitne, and that would obviously help with the envelopment and maybe later a turning maneuver towards Bakhmut should the Ukrainians advance further here. They have some advances in this area, that is confirmed by the Russians, but overall not much changes, and they seem to be creeping closer towards Robotine, but again, no overall bigger changes here. So let's come to the back areas, which we do in the situation reports. Putin has signed a decree that raises the age limit for officers of the reserves by 5 years. It's going to happen between 2024 and 2028. It's going to be raised 1 year each year, meaning not that suddenly you're back in reserves when you're too old, but basically that you will stay as a part of the reserves according to your rank, which is depending on age, depending on rank. So for generals, for instance, the reserve age will be raised to 65. But for junior officers, it's much lower. But according to that, it'll each be raised by 5 years. In the political sphere, we have interesting things. Prigozhin keeps making money. He's getting new contracts. There's now a new contract for 1 billion. I think it was like, 11 million or something. Like still two-digit million US dollars do his companies take business after him doing a rebellion, after him being called a traitor by Putin. It was serious enough that the Wall Street Journal is saying that 13 higher officers were arrested and 15 more were suspended because of the Wagner rebellion. Apparently, the Russian military thinks it's serious enough that they have to do some cleansing of their own officer corps. And still, Putin confirmed that he met Putin on the 29th of June with when he also met Prigozhin, and Putin and Prigozhin met. Putin confirmed that on the 29th. He also met like 35 Wagner leaders. He talked to them and offered them to continue serving under one of their commanders with whom they served for 16 months prior. He clearly wants to keep Wagner as a coherent fighting force, as they have shown some effectiveness, but he seems to be intending to separate Wagner from Prigozhin. This is obviously good for its fighting power. I talked about this in the past. If he manages to integrate Wagner into the Russian armed forces and spreads them around, then their unique fighting style, their unit coherence will obviously end, and they'll just be sprinkled around. But keeping them combined might increase their combat effectiveness, but keeps the risk. It's unclear, at least for us from the outside, it's unclear how high the loyalty towards Prigozhin was and is, and how high it will remain. But if they are kept as a coherent force, obviously the next uprising could be on the horizon already. So from an internal security point, it would be better to take the soldiers and sprinkle them around all different units. But this does not seem to be the interest by the Russian leadership. We could interpret this that Russia is feeling safe that there is not going to be another uprising, but this at least is kind of disturbing then, that the military headquarters in Rostov is being fortified right now with barriers, which would indicate that they see trouble on the horizon again. That's what had been occupied by Wagner, and now it's being fortified, so we'll have to see how solid it will remain. The other thing is, when you think about Putin's position and Putin's strength of power in Russia, that he meets somebody 5 days after this guy has done a rebellion, which killed Russian soldiers, it should tell us a sign about the internal structures and the internal solidity of Putin's rule. And another interesting thing, when you are owing taxes to the Russian government, they will apparently just take it from your bank account from now on. That is obviously something that is interesting, but it shows how the financial situation is in Russia, that they seem to be taking the money directly from bank accounts without asking the owners about that first, without sending requirements first. That's going to be interesting in an overall overview. When it comes to the international support, Germany has confirmed the delivery of 6 additional Gepard self-propelled anti-aircraft. They are mostly used, as far as I understand it, to shoot down the Shahed drones. So now Germany has delivered 40 of them, and they are widely used and highly appreciated by the Ukrainians. Taiwan supposedly is now sending its Hawk air defense systems. They were in service until recently. There might still be some in service. I'm not 100% sure, but Taiwan was still using them, and they had them upgraded in between. So for a Hawk system, which is generally completely obsolete, the Taiwanese Hawks should be fairly well, and in general it has a decent range, it has a decent speed. It's a solid enough air defense system if the target doesn't have too high of electronic countermeasures, doesn't maneuver too much. So for cruise missiles, it should be more than adequate, and it will still be dangerous for planes if they aren't aware enough or if they are under pressure enough. And it seems like they are retiring them, and the US will take them over and then hand them over to Ukraine. Bulgaria is being reported to send 100 armored vehicles. It's probably the ones we see here. BTR-60, so a fairly old armored fighting vehicle, or probably rather a transport tank, as we call it in German, an APC, armored personnel carrier. The Russians are using the BTR-80, which is a later version, but the Ukrainians are also using BTR-80, 70, and 60, depending on what they can get. And Bulgaria had reportedly several hundred of them in reserves. Now they are going to hand over 100 of them to Ukraine. There's a report that the German FFG, that's Flensburger Fahrzeuggesellschaft, a defense contractor that is specialized on production and modernizing armored fighting vehicles, they have created a joint venture with Ukraine, probably for the production of additional fighting additional tanks, additional IFVs. We'll have to see, but there are more and more companies doing joint ventures with Ukraine, and their strategic minister claims that they have massively increased the output of armaments despite being at war and despite Russia striking the rear areas. Finland, not Finland, Sweden has handed over Stridswagen 122. Those are basically Leopard 2A5s that have been modified by Sweden. They were considered to be the best Leopard 2A5s in the world because they received additional armor as well. So they were better than the Leopard 2A5. But obviously now the Leopard 2A6 with the longer barrel, they still have the L44, but they are being considered a very well protected modern tank, and they have received 10 of them, and as we can see, they are equipped with anti-thermal coating, these nets here, to reduce the thermal signature as well. And then we have some highly interesting videos that really show something. This is a Ukrainian small drone that is being shot at by a Tor air defense system. Yeah. Now, that is some footage to be taken. The Tor has a proximity fuse, and obviously the quadcopter was too small for it to fuse the proximity fuse, but it's insane. This is leaving me with an open mouth watching it, or it left me when I watched it for the first time. Crazy picture here. Yeah, we have the screenshot being visible here as well. Here we have a video of a Bradley that was hit supposedly by a 125 millimeter tank grenade. The analysis that I found says it was likely a high explosive anti-tank, a heat grenade, and apparently the tank was able to survive and continue. The crew seems to be unaffected. Obviously, what we do not know is how it's looking on the inside, because this would be the area where infantry is in. If it was transporting people, then they are probably not in the best shape anymore. But at least the tank itself survived. The Bradley survived, and the crew seems to be fine. As said, about the passengers, unfortunately, we can't say much. We have pictures here about the M55S. That's the modernized T55 from Slovenia that was given to Ukraine because of a Ringtausch scheme with Germany. And it was modernized by the Israelis, also receiving a 105 millimeter rifled cannon. And the big question was, what shells will they use? And what we have the images here showing that they have HESH and heat, meaning that they will likely more or less being used as an assault gun than a real tank, basically for assisting infantry than intending to fight other tanks, even though it has thermal vision and even though there are APFSDS for the 105 that are actually fairly capable. Still though, hash is perfect against fortifications, especially when in concrete fortifications a hash shell is hitting. The specific of the squash head creates splinters on the inside and is thus extremely effective in this rule. And heat has a secondary usage against fortifications and infantry, but can also take out lightly armed tanks. Or if a Russian tank is hit from the side without ERA at that place, it will also be able to destroy it. Now we have a sign. This, for instance, is another tank we haven't seen in combat yet, which should be in one of the brigades that are still being kept in reserve. And we have a article here. This is coming back to the FFG thing with the armored production. The Ukrainians had developed the 2S22 Bodana. That's a self-propelled howitzer looking like the César, the French César, and it was used to shell the Snake Island, the prototype. Now, several of them have been built, which shows that Ukraine actually managed to set up a production during wartime of modern equipment, and they keep producing more weaponry. We consistently hear the rumors about the Krim missile, Krim 2 missile, the ballistic missile. Now and then the Russians claim they shoot some down. It was in prototype state, not even clear if the tubes of it were filled. Now they seem to be in use. We see the here self-propelled howitzers being produced. The Ukrainians claim that they are producing more IFVs than they did before the war. That should be BTR-3 and BTR-4. And recently, the defense minister Reznikov ordered new T-84 tanks for the army. So supposedly they are going to produce them as well. Interestingly enough, because you would have expected Russia to be able to take out the factories, but this seems to not be the case. Minefields are an issue, but we see what can be done here. We see it on all details. This is a T-64 and it carries mine rollers, but here you see the trouble with it, that it's fairly slow. With the mine rollers down, the tank can't go its full speed, which means it's more vulnerable while it's being used. So this is why we don't see every tank running with it. And the other thing is, obviously, while the mine roller is made to withstand an anti-tank mine, which you have seen here, it is not meant to take tons of them. So you probably will not be able to clear a minefield hitting 50 mines in a row. After a fairly short time, the mine rollers will have broken down, but you see the tank is just continuing here. It was able to keep driving, and the mine rollers are able to withstand a couple of hits at least, and here we can see the result of it. But you can also see why the Ukrainians don't do it all the time, as this slows the tank down and thus makes it a much easier target for ATGMs and for artillery. And finally, we have an image of a German military aid. This is a Panzerschnellbrücke, basically literally translated as a tank fast bridge that was given to Ukraine to bridge small rivers, to create crossings made for tanks, and Ukraine has received a couple of them as well. This was it already from me for now. If you enjoyed this report, please hit the thumbs up button, leave a comment for the algorithm, and if you're new here, I would like to invite you to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon. This channel is only possible because of the support from viewers like you, so if you'd like to support the channel, you can do so by the means here in the description. Thank you very much to everyone already supporting this channel. That was it from me for now. Thank you for watching, and I'll be back.